Out here on the Atlantic, a 25-year-old bulk carrier cuts through the gray swells. To the master on the bridge and the crew, this massive structure is both a functioning piece of machinery and a home. But a commercial ship rarely dies of old age or physical exhaustion. Its existence is governed by unsentimental mathematics and strict corporate accounting. The decision to scrap a vessel relies entirely on a necessary transition from operational revenue to a residual value liquidation strategy. This liquidation cycle happens on a staggering scale. Every single year, the global maritime industry sends approximately 15 million light displacement tons of shipping to scrapyards. That immense volume of recovered steel is matched only by the new building capacity delivered to replace it. Despite the mighty physical presence of these vessels, every weld and steel plate on the hull has a carefully calculated, unavoidable expiration date. Ultimately, the heavy logic of economics dictates exactly when and where that life ends. Commercial vessels operate on a strict 5-year regulatory calendar overseen by international classification societies. At the 25-year mark, an aging ship hits an insurmountable economic barrier, the 5th Special Survey. To pass, the vessel must enter dry dock for an exhaustive physical audit of its structural integrity. Older vessels, particularly those built with optimized, lighter, high-tensile steel, lack the robust corrosion allowances of earlier designs. Decades of cyclic metal fatigue and relentless exposure to corrosive saltwater take a heavy physical toll, mandating extensive steel renewal to keep the ship certified. This chart illustrates a stark environmental paradox. Producing the replacement material required to fix these aging hulls generates between 1.6 and 1.8 tons of carbon dioxide for every single ton of new steel forged. The industry emits massive amounts of carbon simply to keep an inefficient ship sailing. For the ship owner, these required repairs translate into a massive capital expenditure. The drydock bills quickly surge into the millions, compounded by weeks of enforced operational downtime where the vessel earns nothing. When you weigh this enormous cost against the ship's rapidly dwindling earning potential, the arithmetic leaves no alternative. Liquidating the hull remains the only profitable path forward. Even if a vessel survives its physical surveys cheaply, new environmental mandates from the International Maritime Organization dictate its fate. These regulations alter the depreciation curves of older vessels, triggering a regulatory death long before the steel actually fails. The first measure is the Energy Efficiency Existing Ship Index, or EEXI. It forces older ships to meet strict technical baselines, frequently requiring the installation of systems that physically restrict the engine's maximum output. This severely reduces the vessel's speed and commercial flexibility. This descending graph tracks the carbon intensity indicator, an ongoing operational measure assigning ships an annual rating from A to E. If a vessel slips into an E rating for a single year or a D rating for 3 consecutive years, the owner must implement a mandatory corrective action plan to physically drag the efficiency back to a C. Major charterers actively avoid these poorly rated vessels to meet their own corporate ESG targets. The E zone becomes restricted territory, turning older, inefficient ships into commercial outcasts facing crashing market demand. Not all ships die slowly from age or regulation. Severe casualty damage from an accident, fire, or grounding can trigger a sudden, premature end through a legal designation known as a constructive total loss. This occurs when the estimated cost to salvage and repair the wrecked hull exceeds its insured value. Rather than mandate an illogical repair, the law allows the owner to abandon the wreck to the underwriters. Whether slowly starved by green regulations or suddenly struck by casualty, the ship's operational identity is financially erased long before it reaches a recycling beach. With the decision finalized, the owner ceases viewing the ship as a transport asset entirely. The evaluation shifts solely to a physical metric, light displacement tonnage, representing the exact weight of steel, outfitting, and permanent machinery available for scrap. This diagram shows how maritime engineers determine that weight using Archimedes' principle. They calculate the precise underwater volume of the completely empty hull and multiply it by the standard density of seawater, 1.025 tons per cubic meter. That gives us the precise light displacement tonnage. The arithmetic of the scrap market is remarkably straightforward. If South Asian recycling hubs offer $420 per LDT and our empty bulk carrier weighs 18,000 tons, the scrap value equals exactly $7,560,000. To execute the final transaction, the ship owner rarely sells directly to a scrapyard. They sell the condemned vessel as is, where is, to a specialized intermediary known as a cash buyer, who assumes the massive logistical and regulatory risks of the final delivery voyage. That single multiplication equation is the ultimate economic trigger driving billion-dollar liquidation decisions across the global maritime industry. Before the cutting torches can ignite, a mountain of bureaucracy must precede the vessel to the grave. Safe dismantling requires identifying lethal substances embedded deep within the ship's structure during its construction decades ago. This tracking process centers around the Inventory of Hazardous Materials, or IHM. It operates as a living document, mapping the exact locations and quantities of asbestos lagging, heavy metals in paint, and PCBs in electrical gear. While the IHM follows the ship throughout its life, the ship recycling plan governs its end. This highly detailed, yard-specific document legally dictates the exact sequence of hull cutting, fluid removal, and the safe containment of those hazardous materials. Under the Hong Kong International Convention, which enters full global force in 2025, an approved ship-specific recycling plan becomes an absolute legal prerequisite for dismantling. This strict paperwork forces the industry to shift its practices, transforming what were once hazardous, chaotic wrecking beaches into manageable, highly regulated deconstruction projects. With the ledgers closed, the bulk carrier undertakes a terminal ballast voyage. Her massive holds sit entirely empty as she arrives at the coastal recycling facilities in Turkey or South Asia, lining up side by side against the beaches and dry docks. Upon arrival, teams immediately enact strict safety protocols. They evacuate the remaining bunker fuels, hydraulic fluids, and lubricating oils to eliminate explosion risks and prevent catastrophic coastal spills, while harvesting valuable non-ferrous metals like copper and brass. Once cleared, the highly structured physical dismantlement begins. Workers equipped with cutting torches slice through the giant steel structures, tearing the hull apart piece by piece on the tidal mudflats. This aggressive deconstruction feeds a massive circular economy. Between 90 and 95% of a commercial ship's total weight is successfully recovered and processed into high-quality secondary raw materials. A commercial ship is ultimately killed by unsentimental mathematics. But through this process, the steel forged decades ago finds a second life in new infrastructure or entirely new vessels. Its physical matter achieves a form of immortality, continuously feeding the global trade cycle.